This is just a quick addendum to the last video I did about Eddie Hearn feeling the pressure in light of DAZN's financial issues and 3 of his biggest earning fighters losing in quick succession. Now, occasionally I like to address new viewers and subscribers to my channel to give them a heads up regarding what my channel is about and what they can expect here. My channel is very unusual because I take an objective approach to boxing, and this tends to throw a lot of people off, because the majority of boxing fans and therefore boxing channels are not only biased, but they're psychologically incapable of being objective. In fact, many of them cannot even comprehend the concept of objectivity. And because they are incapable of objectivity and are innately biased, they assume that everyone else is the same. They project their own psychology onto other people. They expect everyone else to be just as biased as they are. An example of the kind of psychology I'm talking about would be John Fury. He picked Anthony Joshua to lose the Charles Martin fight, the Klitschko fight, and several other fights. He says that he doesn't have anything against Anthony Joshua and that he's just being objective basically when he picks against him. But whenever someone picks against one of his sons, be it Tyson or Tommy, John gets irate. He starts accusing people of being haters. Tommy Fury also tipped several fighters to beat Anthony Joshua, yet when Carl Frampton tipped Jake Paul to beat him, Tommy Fury said that Frampton was a disgrace for picking against his own countrymen. Most boxing fans display the same degree of bias for their favorite fighters, but they're actually even worse than the Furies, because the Furies are biased in favor of their own family members, their own flesh and blood, whereas most boxing fans display the same level of bias for fighters they do not know personally and have never even met. When they first discover my channel, they may be attracted by a thumbnail or a video title because it might convey a positive message about one of their favorite fighters. They then wrongly assume that I'm just as biased in favor of that particular fighter as they are, and therefore they expect me to only ever speak positively about that fighter. But I've got a saying that I've been using for many years, which encapsulates the ethos of my channel. No fighter is below praise, and no fighter is above criticism. So when I inevitably start criticizing a fighter who I'd previously praised, people get confused. They can't understand it. They accuse me of being a hater because, again, they just cannot comprehend the concept of objectivity. It completely baffles them. It's beyond the scope of their understanding. To me, it's absolutely bizarre because it's a very straightforward concept, but evidently a lot of people struggle with it. They're so emotionally attached to certain fighters and even certain promoters that they find even the mildest critique of them to be completely unbearable. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine knows a guy who watches my videos, and he was a big Deontay Wilder fan. And he told my friend that whenever he heard me criticize Deontay Wilder, it made him so stressed out and upset that he'd struggle to sleep at night. He'd be feverishly tossing and turning in his bed, angry at something I'd said about Deontay. That is how emotionally attached a lot of people are to these fighters. Thankfully, that particular story has a sensible ending because after Wilder lost the rematch to Tyson Fury and started coming out with all those insane excuses about his suit being too heavy, his own trainer spiking his water, the ref being drunk in the ring, Fury having weights in his gloves and all that, that same guy told my friend to tell me that I was right all along about Wilder. We can accept a certain amount of delusion from fighters given the enormous degree of self-belief it takes to succeed at the highest level. But Deontay's delusion was so extreme that even a diehard fanboy like that was forced to come to his senses. I say all this for the benefit of new viewers and new subscribers, because if you don't want to hear your favorite fighters and favorite promoters get criticized from time to time, then you have definitely come to the wrong place. That's all I can tell you, because one thing I can guarantee is that will definitely happen. You will hear Your favorite fighters and promoters get criticized on this channel from time to time. But I will also praise your favorite fighters and promoters as well. Hence, objectivity. I do not allow my personal like or dislike for a fighter or promoter to hinder my ability to be objective. For example, I like the way Eddie Hearn comes across as a character. I don't know him personally. I've never met him, but he's very charismatic. He's got great banter. And I've heard a lot of good things about the way he treats his fighters. In contrast, I don't like the way Frank Warren comes across as a character. He seems like a very petty, controlling, and spiteful individual. And I've heard a lot of bad things about the way he treats his fighters. But despite all this, if Eddie Hearn puts on a poor show, I'm going to say it was a poor show. And if Frank Warren puts on a good show, I'm going to say it was a good show, and vice versa. Right now, Frank Warren appears to be in the ascendancy in the UK boxing market, and Eddie Hearn appears to be on the decline. That's what I see, and therefore that's what I say. It's got nothing to do with who I like or dislike. It's an objective observation. That's not to say that Warren has caught up to Hearn or surpassed him yet, but the gap between them is definitely shrinking rapidly. And again, I'm talking about in the UK market. There were some people in the comment section of my last video who refuted this assertion. They seem to believe that Eddie Hearn is doing better than ever and that he isn't under any pressure at all. And I respond to that with one of my old sayings. What brand of crack are you smoking? First of all, I've never suggested that Eddie Hearn is one loss away from the dole queue. I'm just talking about the general direction that his business appears to be heading in. It's like when you're on a roller coaster and you ascend to the highest point of the track, there's that brief moment at the summit where you almost come to a complete standstill. Then the nose of the carriage slowly starts to dip forward before you go into a rapid descent. Well, that's where Eddie Hearn appears to be, at least from my vantage point. He's still close to the peak, but the nose of his carriage has just started to dip downwards. 3 of his highest earning fighters have lost in quick succession: AJ, White, and Canelo. Are you seriously suggesting that it wouldn't have been better for Eddie Hearn's business if they'd all won? If so, I'll ask you again, what brand of crack are you smoking? DAZN have failed to secure other major sports in Britain and America. The BT deal fell through. They're hemorrhaging money. Len Blavatnik just had to inject over $4 billion into the business to stop it going under. And you're saying that he wouldn't be putting pressure on Eddie Hearn? What planet are you living on? Yes, the Joshua Usyk and Canelo Bivol rematches stand to be bigger than the first fights, but that's a short-term prognosis. It's naive and short-sighted to believe that a loss won't affect a fighter's commercial value, especially in the case of Anthony Joshua, because he's lost twice in his past 4 fights. Every major fighter has their hardcore fans who'll stick with them through thick and thin, but they're a minority. The majority of their supporters are fair-weather fans. They'll only stick around for as long as their guy's on top, or at least close to the top. As soon as he starts to rack up the losses, the majority of fans will filter away and start to follow somebody else. AJ is in a precarious position because if he loses to Usyk again, which is very possible, then his subsequent purses would decrease dramatically. Therefore, the amount of money that Eddie Hearn makes from AJ will decrease dramatically. Canelo's position is a bit stronger because, unlike AJ, he has the option of dropping down a weight and being champion there instead. If he lost the Bivol rematch, he could still potentially move back down to 168 and reign supreme in that division. With that being said, he only has 2 fights left on his Matchroom contract, and there's no guarantee he'll re-sign. In fact, if he returns to super middleweight and fights the likes of Benavidez and Charlo, those fights would almost certainly not be with Eddie Hearn. And if you remove Canelo from the equation, how many big ticket sellers do Matchroom have in the United States? I said in a previous video that Dimitri Bivol could potentially be a saving grace because Bivol is a matchroom fighter as well. But of course, there were pea-brained idiots in the comment section of that video who completely ignored that and acted like I hadn't mentioned the fact that Bivol was a matchroom fighter at all. In any event, as I stated in that video, it's unclear how many fights Bivol has left on his contract. Bear in mind, he's been with Eddie Hearn since the Joe Smith Jr. fight back in 2019, which was 5 fights ago. So I'd like some clarification from Eddie Hearn regarding this issue because he was slightly ambiguous about it in a recent IFL TV interview. Either way, there's no guarantee that Bivol will become a big ticket seller in the United States anyway, when you consider his nationality and all the baggage that comes with at the moment, and the fact that his performances aren't normally that exciting. This isn't some wrecking machine like Gennady Golovkin. This is a guy who hasn't scored a knockout since 2018. His last 7 fights have all gone the distance. So beyond the Canelo fights, how big can he actually be commercially? It's an open question. And as far as Eddie Hearn's UK business, I've already spoken about AJ. Dylan White's a free agent and his commercial value is bound to have been affected by 2 knockout defeats in his past 3 fights. Lawrence Okoly's doing well, but he's not a big ticket seller. And after that, Eddie Hearn's running dry. He's got some prospects, some people with potential, like Boatsi and Conor Benn, but no one who's going to deliver big numbers anytime soon. And as for this fight at MSG the other weekend, people saying it was one of the biggest fights of the year and all this, I've had all these simps and soy boys getting hysterical over the fact that I told the truth about that fight. Well, let me give you some more facts to cry over. The 2 fighters at MSG the other weekend were only paid $1 million each. And this was not a pay-per-view where they're going to get huge upside on top of the baseline purse. No, this fight was on regular DAZN. So there was no pay-per-view to get upside from. They only got $1 million for a fight, which was supposedly huge. To put it in perspective, they were paid 7 times less than Dylan White was paid as a mere challenger against Tyson Fury. 7 times less. And the reason for this is very simple. MSG did not sell out, despite all the propaganda you're hearing to the contrary. It was maybe 70% full, there or thereabouts. The tickets were abnormally cheap, literally York Hall prices, and they gave away a lot of them for free. So the live gate wasn't great. On top of that, Matchroom and DAZN spent an astronomical amount of money marketing the fight, trying to convince the public that it was this huge event, when in reality, it was a niche fight for a niche market. The reason why the fighters were paid these relatively small purses is because the fight didn't generate enough revenue to justify paying them any more. It's not rocket science, folks. Again, to contextualize it even further, Eddie Hearn was willing to pay Anthony Yarde £1 million to fight Joshua Boatsi. Not dollars, pounds. In dollars is about 1.2 million. Eddie Hearn was willing to pay Anthony Yarde, a guy who's never won a world title, more money for a domestic fight than those 2 world champions for an undisputed fight at MSG the other weekend. Why? Because in reality, it wasn't a big fight. It's a niche fight. Don't get butthurt, folks. I'm just confronting you with the facts and reality. Niche fights like that are never going to be able to compete with Tyson Fury, Alexander Usyk, Errol Spence, Terence Crawford, Lomachenko, etc. from a commercial standpoint. And that's what Eddie Hearn needs. He needs fighters who can compete with some of those names commercially. Niche fights are not going to cut the mustard. The only exception in that space might be Shields versus Marshall, if it's marketed correctly. But those 2 are with Ben Shalom and Sky. They're not with Eddie Hearn. So, in summary, this is not a personal attack on Eddie Hearn. Anyone who takes it as such has either misunderstood what my channel is all about, or they're simply incapable of understanding the concept of objectivity. I've criticized every promoter in boxing on my channel over the years. That's a fact. Just go to my channel page and do a search. For the record, I think Eddie Hearn is a fantastic promoter, and he's done great things for the sport of boxing, especially in the UK. But at this particular time, in light of DAZN's financial woes and several of Eddie Hearn's biggest earning fighters losing in quick succession, Matchroom's fortunes appear to have taken a downturn. So I'll leave it there. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I'm out.